This is a FONA podcast.
Hello, I'm Judith Mills, Chairwoman of FONA, that's the Friends of Nottinghamshire Archives, and this is a FONA podcast. During lockdown, people rediscovered the value of the outdoors, and the parks and open spaces of Nottingham were embraced by the public in a way not seen for many years. In the wake of the coronavirus pandemic, FONA decided to explore the 19th century origins of our wonderful green spaces, drawing on contemporary records, many held at Nottinghamshire Archives. Inspired by the work of the University of Nottingham's Community History Project, The Social World of Nottingham's Historic Green Spaces, and its 2016 live theatre piece, Breathing Spaces by Andy Barrett, FONA presents Our Green and Pleasant Town. In this dramatic interpretation, you will hear the people who created our green spaces telling the story in their own words over 4 episodes. Episode 1, Towards a New Nottingham.
Do you remember old Nottingham town? Some of us do. Even now, faint memories drifting through our dreams.
Or nightmares.
The old town, nestled in the hollow between 2 cliffs, the castle perched on top of the westerly, St Mary's Church on the east, both standing sentinel.
Standing on guard above the town as it lay snug inside its circlet of green, ringed round by the fields in the north, the sandfield, the clayfield and the forest, with its high ridge studded with windmills, their sails turning and turning, catching the breeze. The old place names, some long lost now: Mars Hill, Toad Hole Hill,
Hunger Hills, Bluebell Hill, Mapley Hills. Some of us still remember them. More than 1,000 acres of green spaces, breathing spaces. And to the south the canal, and across that the meadows stretching down to the River Trent.
They say you could walk for 10 miles around on this green belt, circled around this once garden town. Come closer. Can you see? There's James Hopkinson, the cabinet maker, writing his memoir. He remembers. His sandy whiskers are turned grey now, and his once strong hands look frail holding a pen. But there's still a twinkle in those kindly eyes as he thinks back on his Nottingham childhood.
Oh, I can so well remember going into the meadows at Nottingham with the other children to gather crocuses. I should think it was one of the loveliest sights in England to see the meadows about the middle of March, literally covered with purple and white crocuses. And the beauty of it was anyone was allowed to gather them. I suppose there would not be less than 80 or 90 acres of them. And many a basketful have I taken home, singing with the other children as we marched along. Who will buy my crocuses? 20 for a pin, and if you don't like them, I will give you 1 in. Oh, yes. I remember when these meadows were covered in water from the Trent in flood time. If you'd been there, you might have seen me. Big, strong boy, swimming over the tops of fences and railings, some of them with nails and hooks sticking out at the top. Yeah, the great wonder is that I wasn't killed or injured for life. Of course, this was long before there was a single house in the meadows or the railways had been made. But my great delight was on a warm day in April or May to go through a country lane and see and examine the various forms of vegetation that were springing out of every bank and hedgerow as I passed along. I took great pleasure in taking a book and climbing a tall tree at the foot of Mapley Hills on some hot summer's day, enjoying the shade and the book together.
All well and good for those that could afford the leisure time. All very well for Matthew Barker, the old sailor turned journalist, editor of the Mercury, the wanderer along Nottingham's walks, Matthew Henry Barker.
Waxed as lyrical about the walks around Nottingham, writing, let's see, yes, something like, "Oh, how sweet it is to quit the close and murky atmosphere of narrow streets, gas pipes and steam engines, to revel in the clear, pure air that sweeps along the upland meadow." Yes, rather well put, I think, though I say so myself. My book of walks is coming along splendidly.
Sweet indeed for those with the wherewithal to enjoy a promenade along Larkdale up to the forest. But what of those trapped within the town? Garden town no longer, but a town in a hurry to grow and bustle and hum with industry, weaving, framework knitting and the bobbin netting of lace.
And the making of fat profits for the masters and the landlords. They came, the workers, pouring in from the countryside round about, on the promise of work and fortunes to be made. Do you see there? That's John Holmes, the shoemaker. He came with his family from Southall when he was small. He remembers.
I remember when I got into Goosegate, I said to my mother, "What is the matter? Where do all these people come from? What's the matter?" For I'd never seen so many people at once before. We came for the work. Father was a weaver. Weaving by hand is a very bad trade. A man must work a very many hours to earn 12 shillings a week. But when the lace trade at Nottingham was in its glory, my father went to the town to learn it. I was 4 years old when we went to live in Nottingham. Twist hands could earn from £3 to £5 or £6 a week in the glory days. I've known my father earn it, and what's worse, I've known him spend it and come home without a penny in his pocket. And I've had to live the most of the week on coffee without sugar and a bit of dry bread. The glory days didn't last long. I don't know how it was, but father never stopped long in one place and was often out of work. I remember once, the last week he worked at a place. He had only 11 shillings to draw. He'd only had work part of the week, for the trade at this time was very bad. When he got home, he put his hand into his trousers pocket to give my mother the money. But 1 shilling was all he could find. A hole in his pocket had let the half-sovereign go through, but was not large enough to pass the shilling. I shall not soon forget this Saturday night. Only a shilling in the world, and my father out of work, and snow falling fast, and 4 of us to keep. The next morning I got up in good time and went to see if I could find the half-sovereign. Talk about seeking a needle in a bottle of hay, but I think my job was much worse than that. But all my labour was not in vain, for before I got back, I found a shilling.
So you did, John, my boy. You were a good lad. Always did your best to help put food on the table.
Elizabeth Holmes has no fond memories of old Nottingham town.
I never did settle there. I miss Southwell something dreadful. We'd had a nice little house up by the Burgage Green, but in Nottingham it was all brick and muck. The house we roomed in was in Beck Lane near the Plough, a very narrow place, maybe 5 yards wide, and as you sat in your house you could see in the other all they were doing. But look here, John, don't you go speaking ill of your father. It wasn't his fault there was no work. It was the same for us all, and nothing we could do. Look what happened to your Uncle George. Been steady and worked hard all his life and saved the money to buy a lace frame. Lost it straight after. Sold it for old iron. The kind of lace it made didn't sell. Took to the drink then. and never did much good after. And who can blame him? Or your father?
I can blame him, Mother. The times I had to go miles to hunt my father up, looking in every alehouse, and the landlord lying to my face, telling me he's not seen father when he knows he's sat inside, lining the landlord's pockets while we're waiting on his wages and haven't tasted food that day, and us working all hours to earn a bit more. Do you remember your caps, Mother?
From when your father was 16 weeks out of work, and I'd little work either in the shoe binding?
You took to making caps, and I helped you. We stood the market with them, and then I'd take them round the public houses. The landladies and servants liked them. But when the selling was slack and I'd not sold any by the time the 8 o'clock bell at St. Peter's began to ring, my heart would ache. I knew we'd go to bed with an empty belly and get up the same.
I'm sorry for it, John. Sorry you went hungry and cold. But we did what we could, worked at whatever we could find, and made you work too. It was never enough, but it was the same for everyone.
The same struggle for all the women. Hard enough for the men, with trade so bad, but the women. If a man must work a very many hours to earn 12 shillings a week, a woman must work 14 hours a day for 8 shillings a week, and still find the time to tend for her family.
No choice but to put their children to work as soon as they could scarcely sit on a stool, as soon as they could tie a knot or use a needle. The children worked as long hours as their mothers, for a child's wage, of course, lucky if they made a shilling a week.
Their voices can still be heard down through the ages, if you know where to find them. The women and children trapped in poverty, the endless cycle of too little work for too low a wage. Listen now. Do you hear them?
Oh, I've been a lace runner since I was a little bit of the thing that had to stand on 2 bricks to reach the frame. I'm a poor old thing now. The trade's ruined my eyes, so I can't see what's right in front of me. I get a mist before 'em and it's hard to wash it away. You can tell I'm a runner from the way I keep winking my eyes to clear 'em. Huh, what? Did you think I was winking at you for summat else? No fear of that. I'm too jaded after sitting 14 hours at the frame. Hardly ever get outside the house, don't even go to the bottom of the yard for a week. That's the trouble, see. You ruins your health at this trade, and then you haven't the strength for aught else. Haven't even the strength to look after me family. And it's not just your peepers. You're allus leaning to the side at the frame. Makes your belly and side ache and your feet and legs swell up. Leaves you crooked. Can you see how my right shoulder's higher than the other? Reckon you're right glad I weren't winking at you.
I've 4 children, the youngest 3 and the oldest 9, and they all work. Breaks my heart to set them to the trade, but what else to do? They'll starve if they don't work. My husband only had half work when he was alive, but the cholera took him, and now I've to manage on my wages alone. So I pin the younger ones to my apron and they work alongside me. And it's a great thing to say I've never given them a drop of cordial, but there's many that do. It's as common to give an infant Godfrey's cordial as to buy a penny loaf for a penny. They give it to them so they sleep, and the mother may lie it in her lap and get back to work. No, they've no time to go to school. Besides, I can't be paying for that. Time to go out to play? Don't be daft. We've barely time to eat. Sometimes the oldest goes to Sunday school, but sometimes I keep her back because she hasn't proper clothes. I send her when I can. They're all sickly children. We've had smallpox and inflammations and fever. It's the bad air. We lives over the privies, see?
And so, the snug belt of green spaces encircling the town tightened, constricted, turned rigid, locking the town in on itself. Still they kept coming, the workers, and the landlords were gleefully quick to throw up the squalid little houses, squeezed into every spare scrap of space. The town's corporation refused to enclose the fields and meadows for building land, so the town grew inwards instead, people crammed together in the back-to-back slums.
Built back to back and side to side, so there's no fresh air passing through them. Narrow streets leading to enclosed courts with no paving or drains, just an open channel running down the centre of the court. Come with us through the small tunnel into one of these courts. It doesn't matter which one, they're all the same. A world unto itself, shut off from the rest of the town. No gardens here, no backyards, just an accumulation of filth, a breeding ground for disease. The privies are down there should you need them. No one would mind. They all share them. But I'd hold on if I were you. They're not emptied often.
Shall we look inside a house? It won't take long. They're really just 3 rooms, one on top of the other. Let's open this door. See, we step straight into the living room. Small to begin with the fireplace and chimney and the staircase take up still more of the space. Pretty dark inside with only one window. Just a few steps take you to the back wall by the stairs. Put your hand on it. Behind it there's another family in their living room. You can almost feel them through the wall. Can you feel something else? That'll be rats. These thin walls are crawling with vermin. That cupboard under the stairs, that's for food and coal. Let's have a look. Not much of either. Just some bread and a few potatoes.
You can go upstairs if you want, though there's not much to see. There's a bedroom and then a smaller room above that. Sometimes that's used as a workshop, sometimes another bedroom. That's when one family rents the whole house. Not always the case, though. Sometimes one room's all a family can afford. Couldn't something be done? Of course it could. They just needed to persuade the corporation to enclose the surrounding fields and meadows.
The corporation of old Nottingham town, a close and self-constituted band of 7 aldermen, all drawn from the ranks of the town's wealthy businessmen, and mostly sworn to oppose enclosure. There's one among them thinks differently, though. The lace manufacturer, William Felkin. He remembers.
The sheer frustration of it all. Year after year of pushing for inquiries, giving evidence to commissions, and nobody taking any notice. I'd sit there holding some truly splendid specimens of silk bobbin net shawls, embroidered with the greatest care and beauty by our young women. Look at this, I'd tell them. These women have worked upon these pieces for 6 weeks, 6 days a week, and 14 hours a day. And what have they earned? 1 shilling a day, if they've not been cheated by the agents. 1 shilling for 14 hours unremitted and anxious labour. And I say young women, some of them would not be over 12 years of age, mere children. But how can you call them children when they never get to play or exercise in the fresh air? They're never at school in the week. They have to work. They can't rest on the Sabbath, for that's when they must fit in their chores around the home, and they're learning at Sunday school. The only day left to them for exercise and rest must be spent in confinement and mental labour. And even if they could find time to play, where would they go? They've neither the strength nor the time to walk 2 or 3 miles out to the meadows or the forest. The answer's as plain as the nose on my face. Yes, we need to regulate the trade and improve working conditions, But we must also enclose the fields, build houses for our workers, and bring green spaces into the town, parks and promenades, spaces to act as green lungs, where we can breathe clean air.
I'm with you, Mr. Felkin. We should enclose the land and build on it. I've always said so.
Local solicitor William Parsons is enjoying lunch, a cold collation, at the Exchange in the company of Alderman Thomas Wakefield.
I fought my first election campaign on the issue. Back in 1835, there were 18 acres between the Derby Road and the park ripe for enclosure. Being for the enclosure was the only reason I lost, you know. Too many of the council were opposed on principle to even a partial enclosure. You must remember, Thomas, you were mayor that year.
And as mayor, I had a duty to put a stop to such harebrained schemes. It's no good you shaking your head at me like that, Falcon. Enclosure wasn't in the town's best interest. Where was the money going to come from for a start? Parks and promenades won't keep themselves. And then what about the rights of the townsmen to use the fields? Where would they graze their livestock? Besides, those fields and meadows were our green lungs, and you wanted to build on them. How's that in the town's best interest? And as for you, William Parsons, we all know you were only for enclosure to feather your own nest. Your father would have benefited the most if he could have sold his land in the sandfield for development. That would have been a tidy profit for you. It was never the workers who wanted enclosure. It was men like you who saw it as a way to make money out of their land.
It's of no matter the workers don't call for enclosure. It's still the right thing to do. Our green spaces should be open to all, not just those few with the time and money to enjoy them. Nottingham needs to expand, and if that goes hand in hand with William Parsons turning a profit, I'd say it's cheap at the price. Besides, it's all humbug, this bleating on about protecting our grazing rights and keeping the fields and green spaces for the health of the town. It's a smokescreen, that's what it is, to hide the fact you're protecting your own private interests. If Nottingham expands, then the slum landlords will lose their monopoly on housing. They won't be able to keep the value of property up, and they won't be able to keep their slums full. Their tenants will be glad to move elsewhere, given the choice. And who's Nottingham's wealthiest slum property owner? Why, it's you, Thomas Wakefield.
And so the arguments raged back and forth until Nottingham's water engineer, Thomas Hawksley, gave his evidence to the National Inquiry into the State of Large Towns and Populous Districts. His report shocked Nottingham to its core. Hard facts and figures you couldn't argue with, like the average life expectancy in the town being only 22. That's 7 years lower than the national average. Even lower in some of the worst areas, as low as 11 in St Anne's. Finally, the corporation began to listen and to accept the need for enclosure.
Nottingham's Enclosure Act was passed in 1845. It had only taken 50 years. Now a new Nottingham could be created, spreading out into the outlying fields and meadows to the north and south of the town, and bringing some of those green spaces into the town for all to enjoy.
But that same Enclosure Act provided that 130 acres of land must be set aside and kept to provide places of public recreation, kept safe for the people forever. Which is how Nottingham came to have its public parks and promenades, its breathing spaces, its green lungs. But of course, that was just the beginning of the story.
That was episode 1 of Our Green and Pleasant Town, written and directed by Karen Wynyard and edited by Katie Jane Clancy. With thanks to Margaret Knowles, Mo Cooper, Jane Tappin, Chris Weir, Malcolm Prosser, Phil Dunn, Chris Dunn, Dinah Wilcox, Sian Trafford, Martin Goldman and Jeremy Jago for the use of their voices. In the next episode, Green Lungs, we'll be telling the innovative story of Nottingham's first 4 public walks: Elm Avenue, Corporation Oaks, Robin Hood Chase and Queen's Walk.